Yeah, I can't wait to finish watching it actually, because I was like taking a shower watching it. I was like eating and watching
Yeah,
it,
I love it.
falling asleep and watching. I was like, oh, I want to finish the whole thing, but I'm
I'm
gonna
impressed how much you did get in like what, 1 week or something? Yeah. Like Kim is, I mean, on TV standards, maybe fat, but like really not, as we know how media does that.
yeah,
But so much of her character is engaging as like a very empowered woman, and I think they do a good job of showing her not just as this, she's got multi dimensions, but I wish that it felt somewhat like a plot device for me at times, and not like they really gave it the same weight as disabled identity. I don't know. What did you think about how
yeah,
they?
yeah. I think it was glossed over a little bit because I think in the beginning, right at the beginning, they talked about her and her writing about clothing and being like a diva and stuff, and the way she talked about it. But then when she revealed her true, like that she doesn't have money, that she's broke to
Mhm.
Ryan, she talked about her insecurities and things like that. And even, but first of all, I think she's fucking hot. I think she's so
Oh my
hot.
God. Yes,
I have such a
she's
crush on
very
her.
hot. Yeah. Yeah, she was
She's
hot.
super hot. But I was hoping actually, because even at that part where the thinner women at the pool were
Mhm.
saying, "Oh, you're such a diva" or something, because they said that she wrote the blog about
Right.
loving your body. And
Right.
at first she thought, "Oh, well, great," but it wasn't what she had actually thought. They were almost like, if you can love your body as a
Yeah.
fat person, then
Yeah.
anybody can love their body, or something, something to that effect. So there would have been a good moment to continue that thing. I did actually think they were going to go more into body shaming of her, and then his disability, definitely not the same, but
Mhm.
talking about some parallels in terms of what the right body is, and
Right.
what bodies do, right?
Right, right. And I think like for maybe folks who understand that, or coming from the communities, or have more awareness, like we get that there's solidarity there with them, that they're drawn to each other partly because of, their multiple identities are being objectified at this job, but yeah, but I do wish it was more explicit. And I do think one time when she did a great job, or the writers who wrote what she said, I was glad they did this, was she's in debt, as you mentioned, and around she has kind of a shopping addiction, but she says the reason I have this is because I have to keep up with all these white skinny women and desirability, and she's an Indian American woman, and like this is a huge part of why I need to dress like this, and as it led to all this debt. And I thought that was a really I was glad that they was like literally named it, as they
Mhm.
and didn't just let us kind of come to that conclusion on our own. But yeah, again, she's also so funny, and it's so nice to just have like the moments between them. They're so quippy with each other, and these little one liners that they share back and forth. I'm like, God, so there's so many times when I have a moment of ableism in the world, or any other kind of ism, and I'm like, I just wish I had that quippy comment. Where is the script writer in the back of my head that can just be like, blah, 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 blah.
I know, right? Yes, I do like in thinking about this show and talking to like young people around it and
Mhm.
stuff. I really do like the fact that, I mean, I think a lot of shows show friendship, like I have a best friend, this is my best friend and stuff. But um I think that they have to, that I'm glad that they show the friendship, even after he discloses that he has cerebral palsy, after lying, like saying, oh, no, actually, he just let people continue assuming that
Mm.
because he got hit by a car, he limped. But then he finally told people, no, I limped because I have cerebral palsy. And like everyone else just walked away because they didn't give a shit. They
Mm.
were like, whatever, I don't care. Right. And then when he went to Kim, basically she was just like, you lied to me,
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you lied to me about this. And then she was like, that's not the same thing. And, we're friends. So I like that part because she was basically saying, I want to know you. Don't tell me the truth. Don't lie to each other. And let's have this connection, which, it's like, I think when we're young, we're all learning about any kinds of connections and what real friendship is, because we all have a real friend means ... We all say a real friend is there for you when you really need that, when you need them. A real friend will do this, a real friend will do that. So this is a great opportunity to even think about what is a real friend? Like, what do we expect from friends? And like, what are some deal breakers from friends? Like, if a friend did this to me, right? I think it's a great conversation to have because we don't actually create those boundaries. We kind of wait till those experiences happen and crush us, and then we go to the end of it because it's like, they hurt me, and I've been there. She's a bitch. I never want to speak to her again. But then a week later, right? So it's a nice, I guess, a nice little depiction of just how we form friendships and how we come to terms with what we need from people, which are conversations we don't have really.
Totally, absolutely. I really appreciate you pulling that out because it is such a beautiful, like, I want to know you and all your complexity, and I want to be on that journey with you, and that the complexity can be different. I mean, they both come from really different worlds, and that's shown many times. And connecting across difference is something they do, I think, really well with each other. And yeah, what a beautiful thing to have in friendship. And I think when thinking about like the youth piece too, what really stood out to me with him was, he's coming into his own as an adult, but he's also coming into his disabled identity. And there's this kind of phrase that I'm not going to remember who said it, but an amazing disabled author was talking about becoming disabled, not to mean like when your body physically became disabled, but when you came into that identity. And you see him in the beginning with kind of like pushing away this disabled identity. And I think as it goes on, he starts kind of thinking about, well, what does this mean? What does this mean to be disabled, and his internalized ableism, and his relationship with Kim really supports that journey. And it's so beautiful. She doesn't have to be disabled to be able to like listen to him and show him how amazing he is, and also support him in his journey of understanding who he is. And I think that is a thing that a lot of disabled folks do. Well, I mean, everyone's different, but I think there's this thing around when you're in your early 20s of kind of like, well, what does this mean to me? And have I spent my whole life pushing away and trying to be, quote unquote, normal and not disabled? And his mom also kind of supports that. You see her kind of saying, oh, well, when you hung out with other disabled kids, you were so quote unquote high functioning and it made you feel bad, so you didn't have any disabled friends, which was like, yikes. But yeah, I also just thought that was a beautiful reminder for me of having compassion for people as they're on their journey of what an identity label means to them, and how much in culture someone wants to be, and connecting with other folks of that, and like being politically engaged with that identity label versus just kind of having that identity. I liked that a lot.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, that's very because there was one part where you see him, I think either on the computer, on the computer looking up internalized ableism. He's looking that up, and it's just, you see the process, his process unfolding. At first, it's like, I'm gonna let people just assume because they just assumed it, but it was partly him as well, because it's like, I don't have to deal with this shit. I don't have to, say I can't do this because there's a deficiency. It was easier to say I can't do this because some asshole hit me with a car and now they fucked me up.
Right.
And that sucks. I mean, they like the idea that truly sucks to think that, oh, that poor guy got hit by a car, and now you could accept this thing on another level, and then they were born like this, so they had this a complication happen after, or something, whatever the case may be, so that also shows the ways in which ableism, shows up too. Just like this, they were so interested in him getting hit by the car, but as soon as he said, "I have cerebral palsy," they were like, just walked
Yeah,
away. Like,
yeah. And what is, I mean, that was, yeah, that was so interesting to me because they still saw him as disabled, but it was like this traumatic event that caused pity, and then they were engaged. And that's also an interesting conversation within disability community of like people who are born with disabilities and people who gain them later in life, and like the tension between those two experiences and the differences and the similarities. And yeah, but it's like, was it really just that they all pitied him and that's why they were engaged in it? I don't know.
yeah, that's definitely something to like look inward for everyone, right? Like,
Yeah,
when we're engaging with people with disabilities, like what are we coming at them with? Are we
yeah.
coming with pity? Are we coming with a story that we've already concocted in our own fucking minds? Are we making this person just about their disability?
Mhm.
And so it's something really to think about. And this show definitely like brings up little things in subtle and very funny ways to have you think about, like even the comment that the guy said about his sneakers. He was like, "You never wear sneakers that tie, like you just like you like to put the little snappy things on."
Mhm,
That comment, many comments about why can't you do this thing or why can't you
mhm,
grab this thing,
mhm.
and then him feeling really like he had to wear sneakers that tie and tuck it in, so that he could be, it's still in that part of like trying to fit in so that you don't have to. um I guess sometimes I wonder, is it really about fitting in? Maybe, or it could be simply because I'm tired of talking about this shit. I'm tired
Oh,
of teaching
yes.
people, and
Mhm.
it's sometimes less about fitting in, and it's just like I'm so fucking tired of it. Like I just don't want to talk about it. I think when they said, "Oh, you poor thing, you got hit by the car," it was almost like a relief in that moment, like, "Oh, I don't have to talk about this shit."
Yes. That is such a good point, Ignacio. I'm so glad you said all of that because I had not gotten there, and that makes so much sense. It was
Mm,
a different story you got to tell. And that's a really, and to give ourselves permission to be like, if I make a decision to, buy sneakers that tie so people stop asking me about it, it's not always like, oh, do I have internalized ableism? We get to give ourselves breaks sometimes around, taking a route that allows for a little bit more just self-preservation.
yeah. So I think I'm thinking a lot about like some some stuff clearly around sexuality of children or young
Mhm.
people with disabilities, right? Like, and how that the invisibility of that connects
Mhm.
to creating, well, having a harsher environment for a child and possibly, fueling unsafe conditions for a child. And so this is a piece I definitely want to talk about, because in this show, I fucking love that they show the sex scenes. I love that they show, first of all, because they're gay, and
Mhm.
because you never see people with disabilities engaging in any kind of sexual behavior, intimacy, lovership, or anything like that. It's so rare.
Yeah.
So that alone was very, very beautiful to see.
Yeah.
Um, but I know that it's really difficult, and let me retract that. I would assume that it is extremely difficult to think about sex and sexuality, right? Because good old fear. I mean, fear is at the lead of all of us, right? It's like this is the thing that we're always chipping away at, fear. I am
Mhm.
so afraid that my child is going to be hurt. Therefore, I will do all of these things to kind of take care of them, which in essence are not things that take care of them. It kind of does the opposite. It kind of does the opposite. So um, I think this is, a good place to talk about, like, yeah, sexuality, because he's having sex for the first time at 27, which is not a bad thing if you choose that.
Yes.
But I don't think he chose that. You know, I don't think he chose that. And as a 27-year-old person who is self-identified and understands himself,
Mhm.
why hasn't he had the experience of
Mhm.
intimacy up
Mhm.
until now, right? So that speaks to something there, the lack of his sexuality, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, disabled people have such high rates of sexual violence. It is, I don't know the stats, and not that stats are right anyway, but
Mm,
you know, it is astronomical. And because there's power dynamics, you know, that both as children, you know, folks who have to engage, and disabled folks who have to engage with people and their bodies so much more, who might need to be you know, be naked in front of folks, have their genitalia engaged with and touched in ways that, you know, non-disabled people do, just as a care, like with a caregiver. And that really desexualizes people. And if we're not talking to young people at all, but especially young disabled people, about their sexual desire and sexuality, and how to you know, that how to engage with consent and their own body and desire, like that's really, it's such a disservice. And there are slowly resources out there. I've seen a couple in the last couple of years that are talking about disability and sex, and like how to have sex with a disabled person, how to think through like all these really fun, creative things,
mhm.
and how to be a non-disabled person having sex with disabled people. And those resources are out there, and I've learned a lot from them too. I mean, because of course, when you have one disability, it does not mean you understand any of the rest of them. But yeah, just to think that, and I think that used to happen, and maybe still does too, with young gay people, of like, well, you know, young gay women can't get pregnant because, you know, they're not having sex with men, like how ignorant that is and how harmful that is.
Mhm.
And that's, and then we just never talk to young people about sex, and especially, yeah, especially when they're disabled. So
Yeah,
I hate this, but
these assumptions are really bad. And yeah, and I think you know, in my mother's time, and you know, with raising us, I think that the consensus was back then, you know, you don't talk about it, it doesn't happen.
mm,
So as long as we don't talk about sex, then sex won't happen because they don't know anything about it, which in fact was the most terrific thing, you know, because I didn't know about it, I was such a target for the sexual abuse that I experienced, right? Because I had no words for it.
mhm,
So I think this is just like an extra, you know, emphasis on like communication and information is so important. Even I think the slightest thing, like for instance, thinking about uh, if you're caring for a child who has a disability that maybe you might have to bathe, right?
mhm,
So in those instances, because people are in this caretaker role with a younger person, they have never, you know, I don't think they ever even consider the idea of asking for consent to touch them, to wash them, right?
yeah,
It begins with your body
yeah,
is pretty much open to anyone who needs to care for you. So you actually don't have to consent because it needs to happen. So, you know,
mhm,
and when reality is that there will come a time, maybe when they're younger, you know, but even still, I think that even still you can, you know, you can say, okay, you know, like there's energy,
mhm,
there's ways that you can convey, I know this is yours and I'm here to help you. Can I help?
yes,
Can you allow me to help you, right? Because that's a whole different conversation than just doing the thing that needs to be done, because and then I think that ends up making someone feel like a thing, like a chore to be done, not this interaction that we're having right now, that yes, you can touch my genitals to wash them today, actually I don't feel like it today, you know, I don't feel like it. And, you know, even if they say, well, you're going to be dirt, well, I don't care because it's my body. Like
yeah,
today, I don't feel like it. Right. And that to have that agency, and I'm really talking in general terms. So I'm not trying to conflate all disabilities into one thing. I mean, this is where it is possible. And I think depending on the disability and also age, you know, as they get older, about how they can learn in specific ways that their body is their own and that they can have agency,
mhm,
because yeah, they can have agency on a variety of levels. And I think we both know that poverty and a lot of things, you know, complicate this a lot. The poorer you are, the less resources you have, it becomes very complicated. So again, not a cookie cutter model, but definitely some kind of like some food for thought in terms of even that. I say it's a small thing, but it actually isn't a small thing. It's a huge thing, to say the distinction between my body and yours. And yeah. So I definitely, that's something that keeps coming up for me in terms of when, if somebody's watching this who does have a child, and like, how have you talked to your kid about this? And have you actually seen your kid or not seen your kid as a sexual being? Right. I think some parents make that decision early on. That's a decision they make. I think it's just we're still learning, but I think we have to continue to remember, one, I always say, children are people. They are not property, and they deserve their own agency. And I know it happens in a variety of ways for different people, but you can teach, and you can create experiences that show agency and self-worth. And I can say things about my body. I can name my own body. Things like that, I think, really ripple. They really ripple out for when that day does come. When a person is, I'm going to be dating, I'm going to have a life, and you actually have some sort of what do you call it? A framework even for having that language, because I keep thinking back in the moment of when the guy's saying, I love guys with braces, and I love disabled guys, that shutting down part right there. That's also a part anyone can talk about in terms of when you're in a sexual situation where things feel horrible. What can be done, so I think there's a lot of nice nuggets here. I think I just totally crossed over 2 different ideas, but I'll edit that out.
We're so connected, and it made me think too of the importance for all of us to expand our ideas of sexuality, which I know so much of what Heal to End is about, and a queering of sex. But especially those out there who are sex educators who are watching this, considering how you're talking about sex and bodies, and that disabled bodies function in ways that that might be different, or like if you're someone or a parent or anyone who's like, well, my child or my partner, whoever, can't have this kind of quote unquote traditional idea of what sex is, like we gotta keep throwing that out the window, and that sex can and is so many different things too, and the importance of like really, and going back to what you said in the beginning, starting off not just being like, oh well, everyone can have sex and this is how you have consensual sex, but like, what is your own body, and agency and autonomy and communication with another person. And that's not just about sex, that's about any kind of relationship and connection with person. But yeah, just I think there's a lot that I still have to learn about what I consider sex, and that disability has a beautiful, like, creative jumping off point to be like, there are so many ways to get it on,
Yes, that is very true. And that goes back to communicating, just talking about sex can be super fun. Also very, very scary, but like when you engage in it, it can be so much fun. And I think when we create a barometer for young people to say, I'm going to talk to you about sex, because sex is a natural thing. Some people have it, some people don't. It's wonderful for some people. It's traumatic for others. Like talking about it like that, it really sets the foreground for, them discovering who they are sexually, whether they're asexual, whether they're queer, however they have the information to kind of navigate that, rather than, I'm not even going to mention these things to you because you're never going to have a life like that. You're never going to have a partner. You're never going to get married. You'll never have children, right? These ideas, some of them may be true, but that's not the point. Yeah. I think the point is that they get to come to terms of those things on their own, right? they get to experience that journey, and they are still a whole person. Yeah. So I think in terms of like thinking about, oh, even the most, even this thing, talking to your children, whether they're disabled or not, about heterosexuality and queerness, right? Because also you don't think of people with disabilities being queer or kinky or sex workers, or I could go down the line, right? Or people that work in porn. So, people with disabilities are in all of these facets.
People are they're in sex work and they're kinky and queer. I feel like even I mean, this is not statistically proven, but I think at higher rates because they're hella creative. Disabled people have such high pain tolerances and are so imaginative and have their minds just like know how to do so many wild and beautiful things. I mean, sex work is one of the only accessible, is one of the few accessible professions for many people who have disabled people have such a hard time getting jobs. I mean, those things are actually, even if they were less, it would still be important, but they have there are higher rates.
Talk to children, young people about sexuality and its totality, and that sex, the act of sex, whatever you define that to be, is so broad. There's so many things, like so many ways. Because when we focus on the I don't know, basic or missionary or whatever the hell kind of sex parents think about what their children can have, you know, like that there's so many other things. There's intimacy, there's connection, there's so many things that can be done. And I think, again, this all speaks to this comfortability with the topic of sex, right? And it is like being comfortable enough to talk about these things. And that I say this about a lot about trans children, and I'll say this about children with disabilities, that the relationship that adults have with these two groups of children are sexual in nature. And we need to talk about sexuality in big ways, because as a young trans person, so many things are focused on their genitalia.
Yes.
So we're talking about young people's genitalia constantly, right? What are they going to do with their genitalia? Blah, blah, blah. Like it's very sexual in nature. And then here, whether there's the lack of it or shutting it down, or that their body you can access their body at any time, right? To wipe them, clean them, wash them, but still never ever get consent about their body, right? So it is sexual in nature. And so it must be, so we need to think about sexual as much broader, right? And sex is broader, and that only talking about it enriches their life, and hope, the visioning of connection. I think the idea of relationships for people with disabilities, and people make it so bleak, so like it can't happen, and it can, and it has, and it will. Anyone who has a connection with a young person, disabled or not, that when we do talk about sex, we are talking about people with disabilities because they're a part of human sexuality. And that if a young person is disabled, that we are actively visioning with them about the possibilities of what love and intimacy and sex can be, because there's always something. We're creative. There's always something, right? And not shutting that down,